Tonight, if the sky is clear where you are, you can go outside and look up at the moon. It will look exactly like it looked last night, and the night before that, and as far as every human being in recorded history has ever known, exactly like it has always looked. One moon, pale, cratered, familiar. It is one of the most basic facts we know about our place in the universe. Except according to a real, peer-reviewed scientific hypothesis published in one of the most respected journals in the world, that fact might not always have been true. For decades, scientists have been stuck on a strange puzzle. The moon, it turns out, has two faces, not literally, but almost. The side that faces Earth, the one you've seen your entire life, looks nothing like the side that always faces away from us. And the leading explanation for why involves something that sounds almost too strange to be real. Earth, for a brief window in its early history, may have had two moons, and the second one never left. It's still up there, right now, fused into the moon you're looking at, a planet called Theia. To understand how Earth ended up with two moons, you have to go back to the very beginning, not just of the moon of Earth itself, around 4.5 billion years ago. In the chaotic early years of our solar system, Earth was not the world we know today. It was young, partially molten, still forming one of several large bodies jostling for stable orbits around the newborn sun. One of those other bodies was a protoplanet roughly the size of Mars. Scientists have given it a name, Theia, after the Greek titan said to be the mother of Selene, the goddess of the moon. Theia is believed to have formed in roughly the same orbit as Earth, sharing the same path around the sun from a stable position about 60 degrees ahead or behind. For millions of years, this arrangement held. Then it didn't. As Theia grew larger, its position became unstable. Slowly, over time, its orbit drifted closer to Earth's, and somewhere around 4.5 billion years ago, just tens of millions of years after Earth itself had formed, Theia collided with our planet. This was not a small impact. Models suggest Theia struck Earth at an angle, not head-on, in a collision so violent it partially melted both worlds. Enormous volumes of molten and vaporized rock material from both Theia and Earth's outer layers were blasted into space. Most of that debris settled into orbit around Earth, forming a glowing ring of rock and gas. And over the following tens of millions of years, that ring of debris did something remarkable. It started clumping together. One impact, two moons. This is the part of the story most people have heard before. The debris ring eventually coalesced under its own gravity, forming the large, familiar moon that has lit up Earth's night sky ever since. It's known as the Giant Impact Hypothesis, and it remains the most widely accepted explanation for how the moon was born. Apollo mission rock samples support it. Lunar rock has a chemical signature remarkably similar to Earth's mantle, exactly what you'd expect if the moon formed from a mixture of Earth and Theia material. But here's the detail that most people have never heard. Computer simulations of the impact and its aftermath built by planetary scientists studying exactly how debris disks like this behave suggest something else may have formed in that same ring of debris. A second, much smaller moon. Companion moons like this are actually a common outcome in simulations of giant impacts. As debris settles into orbit, gravity doesn't always produce a single body. Sometimes it produces two, a larger moon, and a smaller one trapped nearby in a gravitationally stable position, riding along in roughly the same orbit. If this happened to Earth, the second moon would have been small. Researchers estimate somewhere around 1,200 kilometers across, roughly a third the width of the moon we know today, and only about 4% of its mass. For tens of millions of years, by this hypothesis, it would have hung in Earth's sky alongside its larger sibling, smaller, fainter, but real, rising and setting alongside the moon we know. And then, slowly, its orbit began to fail, a collision unlike any other. In 2011, two planetary scientists, Martin Jutzi at the University of Bern and Eric Asfaug at the University of California, Santa Cruz, published a study in the journal Nature proposing exactly this scenario and modeling for the first time what would have happened next. Orbits in a system like this are not perfectly stable. Over time, gravitational interactions between Earth, the Moon, and the smaller companion moon would have nudged the companion's path. Eventually, that path would have crossed with the larger moons. But here's the detail that makes this hypothesis genuinely elegant. The collision Jutzi and Asfaug modeled wasn't a violent, crater-forming impact, like an asteroid slamming into a planet. It was slow. For the physics to work, the two moons needed to collide at the lowest possible speed. Two bodies in a shared orbit could plausibly hit each other, calculated at around 7,000 kilometers per hour, extremely fast by everyday standards, but remarkably gentle in cosmic terms. The slowest possible version of this kind of collision. At that speed, something unusual happens. Instead of carving out a crater and ejecting debris, the impact behaves more like a thick liquid splatting against a surface. The smaller moon didn't shatter the larger one, it splattered onto it, a planet wearing another planet's face. In Jutzi and Asfaug's model, the companion moon's material spread out across an entire hemisphere of the larger moon, piling up into a thick new layer of solid crust rather than punching through it. Over time, that new layer of crust would have built up into something we can still see today, a region of unusually thick, mountainous, heavily cratered terrain. Scientists have a name for this region. They've had a name for it since long before this hypothesis existed, because it's been a mystery for decades. The lunar far-side highlands. This is the part of the story you've actually seen your whole life without realizing it. The moon is tidally locked to Earth, meaning the same hemisphere always faces us, while the opposite hemisphere, the far side, is always turned away, never visible from Earth's surface. The near side, the face you've looked at every time you've glanced at the moon, is relatively flat, low and dark, covered in the smooth plains known as Maria, formed from ancient volcanic activity. The far side is almost the opposite in every way, mountainous, densely cratered, with a crust that, in places, is dramatically thicker than the crust on the side we see. For a long time, nobody had a fully satisfying explanation for why two faces of the same small world could look so completely different. The slow collision hypothesis offers one, not gravitational effects from Earth, as some earlier theories proposed, but the leftover material of an entire second moon fused permanently onto one hemisphere. Every time you look at images of the moon's far side, the side no human has ever seen rise or set, the side most people have only seen in photographs taken by spacecraft. You may, by this theory, be looking at the remains of Earth's second moon. So is this actually what happened? Here's where good science requires us to be honest about uncertainty. The companion moon hypothesis is taken seriously by planetary scientists because it fits the data unusually well. The predicted thickness of the resulting crust, the size and shape of the highlands region, the fact that companion moons are a known common byproduct of giant impact simulations, all of it lines up with what we actually observe on the moon's far side. It's also, in a strange way, a satisfying answer because of how specific and strange the required conditions are. The collision had to happen at almost exactly the slowest possible speed for two bodies in this kind of shared orbit. Not faster, not slower. Hit the conditions exactly right, and you get a splat instead of a crater. It's the kind of oddly specific requirement that, when it matches reality this closely, makes makes scientists pay attention, but this is not a settled fact. It's a leading hypothesis, competing with others. Some planetary scientists have proposed alternative explanations for the same far-side mystery, including the idea that gravitational forces from Earth acting on the Moon over billions of years could have caused similar asymmetries without requiring a second moon at all. Francis Nimmo, a planetary scientist at UC Santa Cruz who has studied this same problem, has been candid about this uncertainty, noting that, with the data available, it isn't yet possible to say definitively which explanation is correct. What would settle it? More direct evidence from the Moon's far side itself. Spacecraft missions that can sample the deep crust in that region, looking for a chemical signature that's subtly different from material that originated in the Theia impact. Evidence of a truly separate body's contribution. China's Chang'e program has already returned the first ever samples collected directly from the lunar far side. Scientists are still analyzing exactly what those samples reveal, and missions like this represent the best chance we have of eventually confirming or ruling out whether Earth's second moon is real history or simply our most elegant guess. For now, it remains one of the most compelling open questions in lunar science. Not confirmed, not disproven, genuinely, excitingly unresolved. Here's a strange postscript to this story. While Earth's hypothesized second moon vanished billions of years ago, Earth has never stopped attracting temporary companions. Small asteroids occasionally drift close enough to Earth's gravity to be captured into what astronomers call quasi-orbits, paths that loosely follow Earth around the Sun without being truly bound to our planet the way the Moon is. In 2024, an asteroid called 2024 PT5 spent several months in this kind of loose companionship with Earth before drifting away again. As of recent tracking, another object, 2025 PN7, is expected to remain in a similar relationship with Earth for several decades, before eventually drifting back out into the solar system on its own. Astrophysicists studying near-Earth objects estimate that at any given time, Earth likely has at least a handful of these so-called quasi-moons, small, often building-sized rocks, gravitationally dancing alongside our planet temporarily. None of them are anything like the proposed companion moon from billions of years ago. They're tiny, usually just tens of meters across, with effectively no gravitational influence on Earth or the Moon. But there's something fitting about it. Whether or not Earth's ancient second moon is real history, our planet has clearly never stopped being the kind of place that occasionally picks up cosmic companions. It just happened once, on a scale large enough to leave mountains. So the next time you look up at the Moon, consider this. The side you're looking at, smooth, familiar, the same face that has looked back at every human who has ever lived, is only half the story. On the other side, turned permanently away from Earth, there are mountains higher and more numerous than almost anywhere on the side we know. A landscape so different from the one we see every night that, for decades, scientists struggled to explain how it could belong to the same small world. One of our best current explanations is almost unbelievable: that Earth briefly had two moons, that the smaller one, after tens of millions of years sharing our sky, drifted slowly into its larger sibling, not violently, but gently, at the softest possible speed physics would allow, and became part of it forever. If that's true, then in a very real sense, Earth's second moon never actually left. It's still there, every single night, hidden on the far side of the only moon you've ever known existed.